Taste the luggage in the black. Pages breathe when you're not there.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Turn the key, the shadows talk back. Midnight rings you if you're dead. One more line, one more flight into the weird unknown. It's out tonight, and the rainbows of Olive.
Welcome back to the static, seekers of the strange. You've tuned your dials to a frequency that doesn't exist on any map. We call it SL tonight, but you can call it the end of the line. Tonight we step inside the glass-walled cage of the airwaves. We meet a woman whose voice reaches millions, but who is terrified of the one thing every broadcaster fears most: the silence. Because in the dark, between the words, something else is listening. If you're ready, let's give the lady her cue. Here is Flop Sweat by Harlan Ellison. Before we begin, let's hear an introduction by the author himself. Writers take tours in other people's lives. Sometimes it's done casually, an evening stroll whistling down an innocent lane or around a familiar block. Innocent and familiar until the light is seen in the abandoned house, until the fabric of space and time is torn and the gaping hole opens onto the other place, until the lurker in the shadows emerges. Flop Sweat is one of those. I wrote it innocently enough, but something dark and unexpected happened here that I didn't plan on. In December of 1977, I was contacted in Los Angeles by Carol Hemingway, host of the ABC radio affiliate KABC talk show bearing her name. I had done her program a number of times and had apparently been sufficiently weird for her vast audience to ask for return engagements. Several of these listeners remarked on my having written new stories in bookstore windows and mentioned that I had even written a story over the radio for the Pacifica outlet here in LA. She was intrigued and asked me if I would repeat the act on her show. But with the enormous number of commercial interruptions endemic to the show's format, it was obvious to me that even with a 2-hour time slot, I wouldn't be able to write anything coherent and still be able to carry on a conversation. So, an alternate modus operandi was devised, and this was the method. Carol would announce my forthcoming appearance for a number of days preceding my appearance, and as early as possible on the morning of the day I was to be her guest. She would call me and give me a specific thing she wanted me to use as the core of the story. I would take that basic situation or plot element or whatever and write that story that day, completely that day, without any head start or preliminary thinking, and have it finished to read when we went on the air at 8 p.m. that night. Well, even under the most salutary conditions, writing a story to order, and with that pressing a deadline, from dead stop to completion, is a bit of a throw, but Carol made it that much more difficult by not calling until 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and when she did finally get through to me, her story springboard was, how shall I put this nicely? Less than innervating. Had she said, an effluvium covered brigantine without a living soul on board tacks into San Francisco harbor late in the winter of 1888. In the hold is an incredibly stout cage of rare bubinga wood. The lock that seals the cage has affixed to it a strange, oddly disturbing runic seal. From within the cage come the sounds of something not quite human, in labor. Yeah, had she said that, I'd been home free. Or had she said, start with a 60-year-old Viennese violinist who has been having a love affair with a woman who comes to the seedy club where he's played for the past 40 years since he was a young man, every year, but only once a year, on the anniversary of their first liaison. And he continues to age and wither, but she has stayed 20 years old. Yeah, had she said that, I'd have whistled all the way to the studio that night to write my story. Had she even said, disprove the existence of ghosts or God or Ronald Reagan, I'd have had something to sink my fangs into. Tell me a story of the ancient spirit ghosts of the Mohawks. Come again to bedevil these modern day Amerind high steel workers on Manhattan towers. Okay, that's a story beginning. Do me a story that explains why such a high percentage of big business crooks are practicing attorneys. Not bad, a bit nebulous, but a workable basic concept. Sure, I could have handled that. But she had said none of those, nor anything else that might have made my life easier. What she said was, write a story about a female talk show host. I think I groaned. A female talk show host wanted me to write a story about a female talk show host. If true love could have ever possibly have blossomed between Carol Hemingway and me, it was brutally crippled in that moment. And it had been so many years since I'd done any radio interviewing myself, I wasn't sure I could write it with any degree of verisimilitude. Nonetheless, undaunted, I accepted the challenge, sat down, and started plotting. I had 6.5 hours to devise and write a coherent story that wouldn't get me laughed off the air. In a few minutes, I had the basic idea and started typing flop sweat. In the course of typing as fast as I could, I do about 120 words a minute on an Olympia office manual typewriter, never an electric. Yuck, 2 fingers only. I found I needed some data I didn't have in my library, so I called her assistant at the station, Fred Harris, and asked him to describe the physical setup of the broadcast booth, how many and what kinds of telephone lines they had. It's a call in show, after all. And how many commercials per minute, and more, that kind of stuff. The dominant news story during that period here in LA was the mystery of the Hillside Strangler. I decided to use that as one of the basic elements in the piece, and I sat here writing this story with Ms. Hemingway's station blasting away so I'd get the proper cadence of talk to commercials that would make the story read realistically. I wrote all day, and by 7:30 that night I'd completed the 4,500 words, wasting myself in the process. But I then had to shower, get dressed. I'd been working in a bathrobe all day, and I was a bit fragrant. Get in the car and drive all the way across LA to KABC AM. The show went on the air at 8. Fortunately, the top of the hour is given over to a 5-minute news roundup that's fed from ABC New York. That was all the slack time I needed. In the car, speeding down the Santa Monica freeway at 80 miles per hour, I heard Carol Hemingway on my radio saying, Harlan Ellison isn't here yet, but as you listeners know, he's a most unusual person, and I'm sure he'll rush into the control booth at any moment. I'm coming, goddammit, I'm coming, I screamed back at her, pounding the padded dashboard. I hurtled into KABC AM at 8:16 p.m., took a few minutes for salutations and the catching of breath, and proceeded, if one can judge from the subsequent phone calls to the program, to scare the shit out of thousands of radio listeners with the story you're about to read. Now, this story has not been revised. It comes to you precisely and exactly as it was written between the hours of 1 and 7:30 p.m. on December 21st, 1977, the same day it was performed over KABC Talk Radio. Why does he tell me this? You ask? Well, I tell it to you to prove that writers are not mythical creatures that live on crystal mountaintops. They are laborers working with inexplicable and invisible materials, but no more or less noble than a cabinet maker who takes pride in his or her craft, who makes sure the rabbets are tight and smooth, no less approachable than a classy bricklayer who takes joy in the look of a line of bricks laid even and true, no more mysterious or honorable than a schoolteacher who can bring the Wars of the Roses to life for young people. So here it is, Flop Sweat. Her first guest of the evening sat across the table from her, there in the tiny broadcast booth, staring at her with unreadable green eyes showing through the mask. She was dead certain he was crazy as 1,000 battlefields, but he was, without a doubt, one of the best interviews she'd ever had on the program. She knew it without a doubt because her hands were soaking wet with perspiration and her upper lip above the gloss line of Ultima 2 lipstick was dewy with sweat. When she had been in the theater in the years before, she had found that hosting a talk show was easier and steady work. She had come to understand what the perspiration meant. In showbiz, they call it flop sweat, the physical manifestation of nervousness just before going on stage. And during the 7 years at KDID, the flop sweat had dampened her palms and upper lip every time she'd had a dynamite show. It was a certain barometer of something happening. But to call this strange man, dressed in all black, wearing a cheap Kmart domino mask, the kind children wear at Halloween, a happening was to fling oneself face forward into understatement. Brother Michael Darkness was more than a happening. He was a force of nature, a powerful presence, a disturbing reality. Even if he was, obviously, a certifiable nutcase, a card-carrying wacko, a psychotic in the top 1/10 of the top percentile of emotional walking woundeds with whom she shared airspace. Reverend Darkness, she said, it's almost the top of the hour and we have to break now for the network news, but Brother Darkness, he said, cutting her off. She was nonplussed for a moment. His voice, it had the deep, warm, musky timbre of secrets whispered in dark rooms. When he spoke, she thought of a stick of butter squeezed through a fist. Oh, yes, of course, I'm sorry. You've told me several times you're not a minister. I'll try to remember, Brother Darkness. He nodded politely. She could not read his expression around that mask. He disturbed her fluid ease behind the mic, and that didn't happen very often. 7 years at this gig had made her almost unflappable. What I was about to suggest, Brother Darkness, is that we break for the news and you come back for the second hour of the show. My next guest is Dr. Jacob Thies, a very well-known psychiatrist who works with the LA police. He'll be coming on to talk about this epidemic of razor blade killings, and I think some of what you've been saying about evil in our times might be very interesting to have him comment on. I'd be pleased to stay, Miss Ketchum. The way he said it made Teresa Ketchum almost regret she had suggested it. He made his acceptance sound as if they had entered into some kind of unholy alliance. But she signaled to Jerry, the engineer in the control room, and he turned up the network feed pot, and the news rushed in with drums and trumpets and the voice of the $60,000 a year announcer from New York. Now she was alone with Brother Darkness. The on-air studio in which they sat was a claustrophobic box, 15 by 10, with 2 windowed walls. One side looked into the control room, the other looked into the waiting room, where Millie sat taking and screening phone calls from the general public. The studio seemed somehow smaller than usual and throat-cloggingly filled with menace, and it had started out being such a lovely day. She took off her earphones and racked them. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and was suddenly aware of Brother Darkness looking at her not as a dispassionate communicaster, but as an attractive woman, 34 years old, body tanned and well-toned from afternoons at the Beverly Hills Health Club. nose bobbed exquisitely by Dr. Parks, auburn hair cuddled and cozened just so at John Peters' parlor in the valley. She had a momentary flash of regret at not having worn something bulky and concealing. The blouse was too sheer, the skirt too tight, the whole image too provocative. But she had dressed for after the broadcast, for the party CBS was hosting. They were hosting that night at the Bonaventure to promote its new mid-season sitcom. The party at which she would use the sensual good looks, the tanned and well-toned body, the exquisite nose, and the brush-fire hair to play some ingratiating politics, to move herself out of a 7-year rut on local talk show radio and into a network job. Dressing with care this afternoon, before coming into the station, she had given no thought to the effect on her guests, only to how she would present herself at the party. Attention where it mattered, you know. But Brother Michael Darkness was staring at her the way men stare at her in the Polo Lounge or in the meat rack pickup bar of the Rangoon Racket Club. And she wished she were wearing a caftan, a fur-lined parka, or a severe three-piece tweed pantsuit. Would you like a cup of coffee? She heard her voice coming thickly and distantly, not at all the liquid honey tones she used as the trademark of an all-royal sex object when broadcasting. No, thank you, Miss Ketchum. I'll just sit here if that's all right. She nodded. Yes, of course, that'll be fine. I'll go get Dr. Thies and be right back. We have 5 minutes before we're back on the air. She escaped into the corridor quickly, finding herself leaning against the sea green wall, breathing very deeply. Over the station speakers in the hall, the newscaster was headlining the LA Razorblade slayings, commenting on the discovery that morning of an 11th young woman, nude and with throat sliced open, in the bushes near the Silver Lake off-ramp of the Hollywood freeway. She heard the voice but paid no attention. She stepped into the waiting room beside the studio. Jake Thies was leaning against the wall, sipping coffee from a paper cup. The telephone switchboard was lit from one end to the other, all 10 lines strobing with urgency. Millie looked up from the log and rolled her eyes. Jesus, Taryn, we've got a live one tonight. They're crawling down the wires to talk to him. She felt her heart racing. Keep the best ones on hold, and I'll try to get to them after I introduce Jake. Then she turned to Jake Thies, who smiled at her, and it was as if someone had returned her stolen security blanket. He had been on the show a dozen times before, and they had even gone out several evenings. His mere presence reassured her. Teresa, he said, stepping away from the wall and taking her hand, you look a trifle whiplashed. She hugged him and kissed his cheek. My God, Jake, have you been listening to him? The psychiatrist nodded slowly. I have indeed, but it's not so much what he says as the way he says it. A little de Sade, a little Gil de Reis, echoes of Fraterius, a smidgen of Cotton Mather, and some direct quotes from the Evangelium Nicodemi, if memory serves well, all made contemporary by the addition of Jung, Freud, Adler, and Werner Erhard's Look Out for Number One. Nothing particularly spectacular about it. Most modern demonologists plunder the same bag, but your brother Michael in there has a sense of the dramatic and a voice to match and a nasty way of bringing in current events that, well, I can't say I'm looking forward to sharing a microphone with him. She drew a deep breath. Jake, stop it! This flake does a good enough job scaring the hell out of me on his own. I mean, it's like exorcist time in there. When he starts talking about the return of the devils, I swear to God I can feel the slimy things in that booth. And I never thought a kid's Halloween mask could chill me, but each time he looks at me with those green eyes, I feel every part of my body trying to run away and leave my head behind. Millie handed her a Kleenex from the box. Your lip, she said. Teresa took the tissue and blotted herself. Okay, don't worry about it, Jake said, setting down the empty coffee cup. I'll come on like the voice of rationality. She smiled wanly, feeling like a fool. This was hardly professional behavior. They walked back into the on-air studio just as the news was ending. Teresa moved to the console and flipped the toggle switch on the intercom. Jerry, let's do this Southern California Buick dealers, Pacific Telephone, and Roto-Rooter. Is there a live tag on the Roto-Rooter commercial? The tinny voice of Jerry from the other side of the control room glass filled the booth. Yeah, 10 seconds. He ran up the cartridges, and for a moment, before she turned down the sound in the booth, the Buick announcer's voice filled the air. When she turned back to her guests, Jake Thies had already seated himself at the empty third mic, to the right of her swivel chair. She drew a deep breath and sat down. Jake, this is Brother Michael Darkness. Brother Darkness, Dr. Jacob Thies. She watched them shake hands. She studied Jake's face closely, but if he reacted to the touch of Brother Michael's hand as she had reacted the first time he had touched her, the only time he had touched her, earlier that evening, the psychiatrist concealed the fact. Jake did not shiver. He smiled at Brother Michael and said, I've been listening to the interview. Pretty strong medicine for a lay audience just around dinner time, wouldn't you say? Brother Michael's face was impassive. If you think I'm a fraud, Dr. Thies, why not just come out with it? Mendacity is unappealing in someone who professes to be being a man of science. Even such an alleged science is the study of the mind. Teresa's heart beat faster. It was as though she had just received two separate and powerful electric shocks, so close together they seemed one. Outrage and fear at the antagonism of the man in black, which might lead in a moment to a thrown punch, and delight at the instant animus between Jake and the brother, guaranteeing a controversial second hour for the show. She hated herself for feeling pleasure, but it was always this way when something terrible but promotable happened on the show. I didn't know you also read minds, Brother Darkness, Jake said, swallowing the affront. If I wanted to call you a fraud, I'd certainly wait till we were on the air. Brother Michael's tone softened. He knew he wasn't going to get a fight. Not now, at any rate. I'm pleased to know you recognize the apocryphal texts. Too few practitioners of what you call the healing arts familiarize themselves with the black documents of antiquity. Teresa was lost. I beg your pardon. What do you mean? Jake said. I mean, you were correct in recognizing my quote from the Evangelium Nicodemi. A chill spread its web across Teresa's back. Jake had said that in the waiting room. How could Brother Michael have heard it? She reached over and flapped the toggle for Millie. Hey, Millie, did we leave the intercom feed open? Millie shook her head no. Teresa stared at her through the glass. The chill spread deeper and farther. She looked at Jake with confusion. He caught the look. A condemned document dating from the 3rd century, he said. It describes Christ's descent into hell and a session of Satan's Sanhedrin, his court. The Roto-Rooter jingle was just ending, and Teresa held up a hand for silence as she riffled through the sheaf of tags for commercials and simultaneously punched the square red button that gave her a live microphone. So say goodbye forever to clogged drains caused by those tree roots that have grown into the pipes. Get to the root of your problem by calling your Roto-Rooter service representative. She conversationalized the written tag, reading it with warmth and friendly understatement, but all the while keeping an eye on her guests. Well, we're back with Brother Michael Darkness, the head of the Ukite sect, a group we're told has no affiliation with any Orthodox or recognized religious denomination. A man who says he represents those who believe in the return of the dark forces that once ruled the earth. And we're being joined now by Dr. Jacob Thies, MD, PhD, a member of the governing board of the American Psychiatric Association. He's on the staff at the UCLA Medical Center and the winner of many prestigious awards in the field of human behavior. Dr. Thies, have you been listening to the interview so far? Yes, Teresa, he said, and I'm most intrigued by Brother Darkness and what he's been saying. But I think you're mistaken when you say that the Ukites are an unrecognized sect. Brother Darkness, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't the Ukites an early Christian sect who believed that each man had a congenital devil that would be expelled only by constant prayer? They were supposed to have repudiated the sacraments and moral law, to have worshipped Lucifer as the oldest son of the Creator. Isn't that right? About 12th century, if I remember correctly. Brother Michael leaned forward till his face almost touched the microphone. Very good, Dr. Thies. I'm pleased and surprised at your erudition. Quite correct on every point. And you're reviving this sect here in Los Angeles in the middle of the age of plastic? When better? The time is right, he said. What do you mean by that? Teresa interrupted. Just look around, Brother Michael said softly. Everywhere a belief in the irrational, and the obscure takes greater hold daily. Films tell us we are being watched by aliens from other worlds or that demons infest the night. There's a frenzied rush to believe in astrology and demonology and assassination conspiracies, in superstition and magic. We seek messiahs on all sides: Atlantis, the Bermuda Triangle, lost worlds at the center of the earth, and spirits speaking from the grave, Eastern mysticism. They dominate our every waking moment and plunge through our dreams at night. Do you think this is accidental? No, I'm sure you don't. You may be confused and frightened by it all, but in some secret part of your mind and your soul, you understand that it's the first clarion call of the ancient devils, come again to rule us, as is only right and proper. And they were off. Teresa barely had time to get in the live commercials required by the log and the FCC. She had run them in clusters, knowing her listeners were pounding furiously on the busy telephone lines. Jake and the brother went at it fiercely, with Jake trying to hold a line of logic and sanity against the ferocious dynamics of Brother Darkness's statements. The first of the calls came in at 20 after the hour. Okay, let's take a break from this for a moment, Teresa said. Phew, you two make my head spin. Let's hear what our listeners have to say. Dr. Thies, Brother Darkness, if you'll use those headsets, you'll be able to hear the caller. Okay, hello, this is Teresa Ketchum, and you're on KDID Talk Radio. Who's this? The voice that came across the line was strangely unisexual, neither male nor female, unidentifiable neither as young nor old. It seemed to be coming from a great distance, though it was clear and precise. This is someone all of Los Angeles wants to know, the voice said. I'm responsible for the razor blade cleansings. You call them slings, but I assure you they're cleansings. Through the glass, Millie's face filled with horror. She grabbed for the private line and dialed. Teresa saw her frantic movement and knew at once she was dialing the police emergency 911. Thank God Millie was on tonight, not Charlie, who was so slow on the uptake that he often patched through rambling dingbats. Come on, whoever you are, Teresa said, stalling for time so the police could trace back across the phone company's machinery to the line on which this self-proclaimed killer was speaking. We know there are enough cuckoos out there who like to confess to crimes to fill the forum. Why should we believe you're the razor blade killer? It isn't necessary that you believe, he said, but here's a bit of information the police have been holding back. When I perform my cleansing operations, I always cut a pentacle into the sole of the left foot of my sacrifices. He went on speaking, but Teresa saw Jake signaling her frantically. She hit the green button, killing the live mic, and Jake gasped, "It's him or her, I can't tell which, but that's even been kept out of the coroner's reports." How do you know? She asked. For God's sake, Terry, I'm working with the LAPD on this. It's the killer, I tell you. She punched the mic to life. Why are you calling us? The voice went on carefully, very steadily. I just wanted to say it would serve you to listen to what Brother Darkness is saying. He's right, you know. The most violent reaction came from Brother Michael Darkness. He grabbed the boom on the mic and pulled the instrument to him. Whoever you are, he said, you've got to stop this. It's awful. It's not right. You're a sick person. But the line went dead. The dial tone came over the open mic. They sat there in silence, knowing that all over Los Angeles, pandemonium was gripping the thousands of listeners to this program. Knowing that if the station management was listening, they were already calling in on the private lines to find out why the 4.5-second time delay intercept hadn't been used. Knowing that the police were on their way to the station, and knowing that out there somewhere, a lunatic was being primed to kill again. Surely that was what this portended. Another slaughter. She didn't know what to say. the first time in 7 years, she was too terrified and too stunned to let her sense of theatrics override her shock. But Jake had already jumped in. Brother Michael, do you know that person? I swear to you, I have never heard that voice, he said. I don't want you to think that my beliefs or the sect I represent have anything to do with murder. But that person, male or female, I can't tell which, that person says your doctrine is correct. That speaker was an adherent of what you profess. Now do you see what your insane, your profane doctrine leads to? Chaos, lunacy. It makes it all right for madmen to kill innocent people. And Millie was waving frantically from the other side of the glass, signaling Teresa to pick up line 3. She punched up line 3 and started to say, "You're on KDID Talk Radio," but the voice from the night came once again. "Don't try to trace me," it said. "You'll have no luck. I just want you to know that it all begins and ends tonight." Teresa heard herself gasp, and then she barely managed to say, "What do you mean?" And the voice said, "It's all coming together tonight. Have you looked out at the moon? It's full tonight. And everything you people believe, all the mad things, all the terrible things, all the things Brother Darkness calls the irrational, come together. Belief in the dark things, the ancient fears, the crazy things you all believe in your souls really move the universe. All of it has become strong enough for the end of my cleansing labors and the beginning of the apocalypse." And the mic went dead again. Teresa cut in Millie's intercom. Where did that come from? Millie was crying. That was line 3 from Orange County, but the first one was an LA line. It can't be. Jake's face was white with fear. "Oh my God," he said, very quietly, the words trembling with terror. Brother Michael was babbling, saying over and over, "I had nothing to do with it, nothing. I don't know him. I swear I didn't mean any harm." And as the hour wore to a close, there were 2 more calls. One on a line from Long Beach, the other on a line originating in Glendale. It was impossible for anyone to get from one of those far areas to another in the space of minutes, yet it was the same voice, and it happened. And when the police came, they took Brother Michael away, and Jake went with them to help coordinate the mobilization of every available cop in the city. And when the hour ended, Teresa was left sitting in the booth, shaking with terror. Party tonight? No, not possible. No party tonight. Perhaps no party any night. That voice, the calm in the words, the certainty. Tonight, the apocalypse. And one word from the Razor Blade Killer's last message. Armageddon. The final battle between good and evil. The last battle between the forces of the Creator and the dark demons who had been banished before man walked the earth. "Terry, I'm going home now. Will you be okay?" It was Millie's voice from the other side of the glass. The control room was empty. Jerry had gone. Teresa looked up dazedly, nodded once, and tried to rise. She found she had lost the strength to leave this terrible little box, at least for the moment. "Go ahead, Millie. I'll see you tomorrow." She let her hand lie on the console after releasing the toggle. Millie left. She knew there were other people in the building. In other studios, KDID was carrying on, even in the face of what had gone out over the air tonight. She found that she was too frightened to leave, to go out through the corridors, past the security desk, into the parking lot with its high wire fence, to get into her car all alone, and to drive across town to her apartment. No, she would stay here, safe in the booth, locked away from whatever might happen tonight. There was a faint light in the empty control room. She looked through the glass, strained forward to see what it was, moving toward her. A faint purple light, soft and blurred, like a fading bruise on battered flesh. And now another light, in the glass of the waiting room on the other side of the studio. She stared from one to the other, watching them moving slowly toward the glass partitions. Now another light in the control room, and another. 2 more in the waiting room. There was a rumbling beneath her feet. The studio trembled with the reverberation of an impact in the earth. Through the soundproof walls came the dull roar of explosions. Tremblers rippled the floor. The vinyl tiles buckled around her feet. The faint lights moved closer. Figures coming toward the glass, stopping to stare in at her. Figures in long black garments with drawn cowls that covered their faces. And strange, sickly purple light, the faintest, most terrible glow shining out from beneath the cowls. They stared in at her. She could see no eyes, but they were staring in at her. They raised their arms slightly, slowly, and the sleeves of their black robes fell back, revealing their hands. Teresa found that she could not breathe, that her chest was convulsing with the pain of her wildly beating heart. Their fingers did not end in flesh. Metal. Sharp, cold metal, thin and final. This was the answer to how phone calls from the same person could come from distant sources. There was a sound of movement just outside the door of the studio. The walls shook with the echoes of the cataclysm outside. The roaring was louder now. And in the moment before the door opened, she had the final petrifying thought that she had been part of it all, had spread the doctrine of irrationality and superstition every night for 7 years, had given a platform to every demented true believer whose wild fantasies might build her audience. And now her worshippers had come to sacrifice their very own prophet. She felt cold and dead already, could feel the chill slice of the thin metal fingertips. Her palms were soaked with sweat in expectation of the final performance. The door opened and they filed in to fill the studio. They stood staring at her as she felt her life clog up in her throat and arteries. They raised their arms and the sleeves fell back from pale flesh and metal fingertips. She waited for the first touch. And they sank to their knees, lifting their arms in supplication. She began to tremble with the rictus of a scream shaking her like a fever. Now she knew the worst. Now she understood. She was not to die. She had broadcast the word for them every night for 7 years, and she was not to die. She would be their dark priestess, like the others who had done their spade work, like the others who had spread the word. She was to be kept alive, perhaps forever. Dark priestess in a world of desolation, ruled by devils, cleansed of humanity. She would not die. More ruinous than death, to rule forever in hell, lovelessly alive, worshipped by eaters of the darkness, to live on, coated always with a cold sweat, through a final performance that had no curtain and no exit lines. Her scream could have shattered glass, but it didn't. It merely resonated against the metal fingertips of her subjects, her masters. From the burning world beyond the studio came the wind whisper of the plague of locusts. Teresa Ketchum finally found her audience. The problem with broadcasting into the void is that eventually the void decides to call in. Next time you're driving late at night and the radio starts to hiss with static, don't try to find a clearer signal, just turn it off. Because once you hear the voice behind the white noise, you can never unhear it. Until next time, keep your dials locked and your eyes on the shadows. You're listening to SL Tonight. Good night.
Thank you very much, Dani. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell her how good she did, folks. Thank you very much. Good night. There, I had to do that.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Was it all right? I was getting tongue-tied a couple times. Yeah.
treasure got lost,
but never learned to die. Unseen visions burning bright,
Bradbury's ghost.